Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, one at a time. This is going to be episode 7 of season 9, Debra's Parents, the final episode featuring Lois and Warren. This is an interesting one. This is probably the closest in this season to for me coming to say I saw this in syndication, but technically I didn't. I saw it before I got this set you see, which is skinnier than the previous couple seasons, not counting my season 8 one since that was a re-release. And it was on a extra DVD that's somewhere over there that came as a bonus when I got one of the other sets. I believe it was a holiday themed one, and this was the season 9 one they had on there. And I watched it, I'm like, I know this is after the episode where they get divorced, but I wonder what's going on in here. And I'm watching it, and without knowing what season it was from, but knowing it was after Robert and Amy's wedding, because of what we see later on, no, I had a feeling, okay, it's from the last 2 seasons. So then once I got that DVD, I'm like, oh, it's from here. Now, with the title like Debra's Parents, you're probably wondering, it's about Lois and Warren, but in what regards? I mean, we've seen them have their marital issues. We've seen them go through the divorce. We've seen the aftermath of it with the older woman. I mean, what could they possibly do now outside of one of them? Well, here's what we're going to see as we talk about this one. This episode was written by Leslie Cavanagh, if I'm pronouncing that right. And I have to say, well done. Well, I wouldn't say this is my favorite of the entire season, but this is a great episode. I know some people might be going, really? Great? Did you say that? Yeah. This is one of the few that I remember, like, okay, I'm going to have fun with this one. But rewatching it for this, I laughed a lot more than I remember the last time. Maybe it's because I'm watching it with an older mindset and no longer having the people who were parental figures for me in my life. I understand one of the points of view a little bit more. Now, this is a Thanksgiving episode. It starts morning, Ray's eating his breakfast. Debra comes in and tells him, like, hey, we got a bit of news for Thanksgiving I got to tell you, and that is, I know my mother was coming, but I accidentally invited my dad, which, of course, Ray has the reaction you would expect Ray to have, where he's like, oh, really? They're divorced. They legally said they no longer want to have anything to do with one another. So now they got to figure that whole situation out. It's not like when they were married, where they could easily come and stay in the same house. So Debra has fixed it to where Lois is going to stay across the street at Frank and Marie's house, and Warren will stay there. Which, of course, makes that a little bit easier. But, of course, also means that they have to give up their bed, and Ray is going to have to deal with a naked man sleeping in his bed again. Well, they show up. Things seem semi-cordial between Lois and Warren, which, considering how things were last time and how their marriage ended, is saying something. And I know there's a big stereotype about once you get divorced, it always has to be, which in certain circumstances I can see why, like if there's cheating and abuse and all that, or things turn nasty during a divorce, getting custody of the kids, the whole poisoning the mind thing against them. When there's situations like that, I can see. But there is room for there being some cordialness when it comes to divorce. I mean, even though I wasn't around during the divorce part, I've seen in the aftermath that can be. Like, my grandmother and her first husband, my grandfather, they were cordial even years after the divorce. I mean, he lived next to us for several years when I was a kid. And that was after she got remarried to my papa, the one who helped her raise me. So, and they got along fine, those two. So it was like, so there can be some cordiality in the divorce process. Here we see a little bit of that with Lois and Warren. It's everyone around them who is making it feel a bit awkward. Mainly comments from like Frank and all that, when they're talking about trips that Warren has gone on recently, that he's going on, ones that they went on. And Frank says one of the lines I remembered, and it's a pretty funny one. But from some of the reactions around him, this is an example of a character. Well, with Frank, he doesn't really care. He has situational awareness, but there are times where he just does not care. And that is, of course, Al the ladies' pal, Al-E-Money. I mean, it's such a simple pun, but it really does fit the whole thing. And all the actors, the reactions, you can really tell, like, oh, Frank's making this really awkward. And, of course, it's Frank being Frank. And, of course, Marie being her usual Marie self. If I sold merch, that'd probably be a slogan somewhere, Marie being her usual Marie self. She gets some of her busybody comments in there. But they're religious, considering divorce is on the table, where she mentions eternal damnation. And watching how the scene was playing out, I couldn't help but think, it's like, gee, it's a wonder that at this point in her life, no one has tried to take an actual shot at Marie outside of Robert's ex-wife. You'd think by now somebody would at least give her a slap across his face or backhand her with all the comments. And I'm not talking about Frank with domestic violence. I'm talking about someone gets so pissed off by her words that they smack her. Which I know someone's going to say, well, that's battery and all that. True. But it would also technically be the consequence of her actions with how much of a busybody she is. It's just, watching stuff like this, it's like, wow. A lot of her comments are fit the definition of the joke, and then the fight started. And then, of course, another one of her passive-aggressive digs at Debra's cooking, which I'm like, season 9 and we're still going to that well. Those jokes stopped being very funny like 2 seasons ago, maybe even before that. But like I've mentioned before, say it with me. Yep, sitcom writing. Well, things look like they're going from there. I mean, Ray and Debra have a little talk off in the kitchen about the awkward situation and hope things aren't going. Robert, of course, in the whole situation is doing what you would expect him doing. He's hoping that all this stuff, if they can get it out of their system, they'll be nice when Amy's parents come in the next day. Which makes sense, because you know both sets of parents being there, that would give Frank plenty of Frank fuel. Well, we cut to Ray trying to sleep in Allie's bed with Debra. He's having difficulty because he's got the bad pillow because Debra forgot his pillow. Well, he realizes briefly that, hey, Warren hasn't come to bed yet. Maybe I can go sneak my pillow. Big mistake for Ray, and now he's probably going to want to gouge his eyes out, or at the very least clean him with chlorine, because when he goes in there to get his pillow, he sees a sight that no man should see, and that is his in-laws, and in this case his divorced in-laws, beginning to go at it like bunny rabbits. And of course, obviously it's TV, so we don't see anything. We hear like some of the foreplay sounds, like, oh, you're so Russian. It's Ray Romano's facial expressions in character that really sell it, where he's like, oh. And of course he does talk with Debra about it. Debra jumps to the conclusion that you would expect her character to, where she assumes that this is the sign of them possibly getting back together, which I get. If you found out your divorced parents were having a physical tryst like that, that's probably where your mind would go. And later on, when she and Ray are talking about it, once we get the truth out, I understand why she reacts to that, but we're jumping ahead a little bit. The next morning, there is a little bit of awkwardness at the table when Warren and Lois are there, which, once Debra walks away, leads to them realizing, oh no, we're outed. And Ray tries his best to divert it, but there are times where he's not the best liar, and he easily gives it up, and they're like, oh crap. And the conversation goes to Debra thinking that they're getting back together, but nope. What Ray saw the night before was nothing involving a relationship or whatnot. It was just animalistic, as they put it bluntly, sex. Just that. Physical, nothing romantic. And of course we see that some of the argument issues that they had when they were married are still there as they're going up the stairs. Now, when Ray and Debra have the little conversation about all this, and she's like, no, there has to be a relationship thing, and she's talking about how it's a little different than Ray, because Ray has always seen his parents together and all that. Yeah, that's true. But then on the flip side, the thing we talked about in the divorce episodes, Debra has always seen her parents being like in a very good relationship, and then her little joke comment about the Barones are the ones that need to get divorced. I think it's that part of her reaction in this episode stems from the fact that before we saw their marital problems, she only saw the front and saw them being like an ideal marriage. And then she saw that wasn't the case. Here, because of that, I think she's a little bit in denial. And here, seeing the little grain, the kernel that they might be getting back together and she can have her parents like that, she's grasping at the straw and looking at it and trying to hope it and will it into existence. And then, of course, she sees it's not to be. And because of the fact she's getting the news from Ray, obviously she's going to downplay it because what we've seen. I mean, we've seen evidence in multiple episodes that Ray at times cannot be the most trustworthy person and he'll lie. I mean, previous episode to this, voice therapy. Need I say more? But then there's also times where he's telling the truth. But of course, you know, it's one of those things, you lie enough time, people are not going to believe you when you come out and tell the truth. Well, Debra goes up to have a conversation with her parents and walks in them on again. And this leads to the moment that I think is probably the best moment for comedy in this whole situation. That when Leslie was typing this episode, I bet when she was thinking of like how to make a big funny moment for this part of the episode with the characters on hand, she was like, I'll throw in a second time, have them come down the stairs in towels. And what's the best joke I can probably do here with what I've written so far? Have the McDougalls show up right in the middle of the conversation. And they do. As they're talking about what they saw. And they walk in right as Warren is saying the big thing, followed by Lois's thing. When Debra is confronting her parents about what's going on. And Warren goes, you don't need to be married to have sex. Which is true. But saying it in front of the hyper-religious McDougalls, the comedy there just writes itself. But the acting around it is what really sells it. Is like the look on the McDougal's face. Those two really pull it off. Where they're like, oh no. Especially the look on Pat's face. She's like, oh no. And then to add to it, having Lois mention that their divorce has helped them explore their sexuality. Oh, you know the McDougalls are going to nope out of there. And then I love how Robert tries to cover for it. It's a play we're auditioning for. We got a part for you. And McDougalls just turn around and leave. Perfect comedy moment there. And of course, this comedy, it goes down into a little bit of a dramatic moment with Lois and Warren talking to Debra. And it's the conversation you would expect here, like, what was that if there was no love or anything up there? And there's a very big heartfelt moment here that, so when you think about a relationship, a long-term one ending, especially one with this many years, whether it's a marriage or you're just together for so long, this is a good question and a good thing that is raised here, and that is that when you're used to that person being there for so many years and suddenly they're not, it can get lonely. Now, in this episode, they're using it in the context of a loving partnership one, but you can take that, what he's saying, and apply it in other ones, like looking at it kind of from Deborah's perspective, when you're used to having that rock and of those people there for support and they're no longer there. You really do feel it. And I can tell you that's one thing about this episode. I feel maybe more now. I'm trying not to get emotional as I'm saying this. It's like having lost all my parental figures, which were my grandparents and all that. Since I first saw this episode, this part, and how it gets you thinking a little bit with the drama, it's like, it hit me right here. And that's why I say I understand what Deborah's going through in this episode and why she's feeling the way she's feeling here. And of course leads to the moment where Warren's like, I know what I'm thankful for this year. And of course the nice little ending comedy beat for the pre-epilogue moment, because of the fact they're still wrapped in the shawls and all that. And of course the epilogue of this episode is the McDougalls driving home. And you're wondering, like, what could be the line to say? And of course they have Hank go, I don't care what that play is, I don't want to be in it. Something like that. Perfect way to end this episode. Now, I don't know how many episodes are getting up on the VHS list total, but depending on how many from season 9 I throw on there, I can definitely see this episode making it, or at least being in the quick running for it. Because this is a fun episode. I don't know if I'd put it as a hidden gem, or like an underrated one, like some of the episodes I've revisited and I found I liked them more, like Fascinating Debra. But definitely one of my favorite of the season. And a nice way for Lois and Warren to go out on. Now the next one is one I definitely would say is a hidden gem, because I remember the concept of the episode, but other than one moment in the episode, I don't really remember a lot about it until I rewatched it. And that, of course, is going to be A Job for Robert. And oh, what a job it is. Till next time, everybody.